guys, and welcome to today's session. How are you doing? I pray that all is well with you and your family at this time. So today we are on the 23rd and final verse of this binding of Krishna pastime, Utkal Bandhan, where Mother Yashoda is binding Krishna to this grinding mortar. And we've seen the wonderful exchange between the pure devotee Mother Yashoda and the Supreme Lord in His mercy and majesty, and how this beautiful relationship is being exchanged for us as sadhana bhaktas, so that we can strive to develop and also understand more and more what is pure love. What does it mean to have love of God compared to the love of this material world? So we move on to this beautiful verse. It's text number 23, and it goes as follows. Pura narada shapena vrikshatam prapito madat nalakuvera manigriv itikyato sriyan vito. Translation: in their former birth, these two sons, known as Nalakuvera and Manigriva, were extremely opulent and fortunate. So we can see this beautiful pastime is now entering into the backstory of these two trees that Krishna has just glanced upon. So how did these two trees end up to be born in Gokul, Mahavan, in near the household of Krishna? So the story continues in the next chapter, chapter 10, where it gives the backstory of these two boys, Nalakuvera and Manigriva. So who are they, where they come from? We touched of it a little bit yesterday, that they were the sons of Kuvera. So we know Krishna also explains in Bhagavad Gita that the yogi that has not completed his practice, prapya punyam kritam lokam ushitva shashvati shama suchinam shrimatan gehe yoga brasto bijayate, that if the yogi has been unsuccessful in their practice in a previous life, then in this life, suchinam shrimatan gehe, that they're born in two families. So we know this from results of loved ones that have passed away. You know, you may have had a loved one, one's parents, one's mother, one's father, one's relative, somebody who's passed away. But because they've practiced Krishna consciousness, and maybe they have not completed all the way, they have not chanted 16 rounds, they didn't get initiated, but they have some connection to the practice. Then what is their result? Suchinam Srimatan Gehe. 6.42 Bhagavad Gita describes this. Prapya Punyam Kritam Lokam. These people who have practiced in the past life, then Ushitva Shashwati Shama, Shuchinam Srimatan Gehe. They'll be born into families that are either wealthy or practice Brahmanical culture. They are Vaishnavas. So one of these two, Prabhupada gives in that purport, he explains that me and my spiritual master were very fortunate to be born in Vaishnava families. And he gives the example of Suchinam. Suchi means to clean, so it's Brahmins. Suchi. So Suchinam means Brahmanical culture or Vaishnavism, Vaishnav culture. And Srimatan, born in wealthy families. So this is the example of one born in a wealthy family. Because by wealth, one gets frustrated very quickly. Because everything you want, you can buy and get. Like in America, they speak of the Kardashians. Anything they want, their children are so spoiled that anything they want is of the highest material order that those children want. So very quickly, those children, there's nothing that they will hanker for in this world. So what will happen? Very quickly you'll get frustrated, because there's only a certain threshold, a certain limitation to material enjoyment. And once it frustrates you, once the mind is not titillated with that kind of sensual enjoyment anymore, that's it. You're not interested anymore. So if you're not interested in matter, what other interest do you have? Spirit. You start inquiring into spiritual nature. Atato Brahma Jignasa. That's why the Upanishads describe that now you've come to the human form of life. Atato, now, finally, Brahma Jignasa. Inquire about the spiritual nature of this world. So they start inquiring. We see now many famous stars like Will Smith in my time when I was growing up. He was very famous as, what was it? The Prince, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Used to be a documentary series that we used to watch on TV. And now he's an elderly man, he's got children, and he's inquiring onto the spiritual path. He does meditation and practice every day. He's read Bhagavad Gita, and his daughter actually sang a song called Govinda. So this is amazing how this is happening. So we are exploring now the other side, Srimatan, those who are wealthy who now come to the spiritual practice. So these two boys are an example of this, Nalakuvera and Manigriva. Born in rich, opulent family, nothing to need. You think your father owns this? When we were growing up, we will fight sometimes and say, who you think your father owns this here? And they can say, yes, my father is Kuvera. They can really say, oh, my father owns this because he's the treasurer of the demigods. Any amount of money and wealth, materially, that Kuvera can sort out for the demigods, resource. Remember, what he gives is different from what Lakshmi gives. Lakshmi, if you worship her this is why Lakshmi Puja is so difficult to accept. Because you're worshipping Lakshmi without Narayan. She doesn't want to be worshipped like that. This is where the concoction has deviated. Because she always wants to be with her husband. So you worship Lakshmi without Narayan. That's what Ravana tried to do. He took away Sita without Ram. So this is why it's so, when we get misdirected by people who don't know better, this is why we need Vedic philosophy. This is why we need the Vedas. We need people who study the Vedas and teach it to us and share it with us. Otherwise, we so easily get misdirected. And that misdirection is not only affects us, it affects all the generations below us. So you start your own misdirected sampradaya, misdirected parampara. Param, 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 param. All the generations that come after you, all misdirected. That's where we find ourselves today. That's why Prabhupada's teachings are so important. It's strong when it has to be, but it's not strong to hurt you. It's strong for the mind. Because it's shaking the mind out of that illusion. And this is one of the illusions that we find these two boys in. Because they are now frolicking in the Mandakini Ganga. This is Ganga, and they're dancing around there naked, dancing and playing around with damsels in the Ganga. That's what you do in Ganga? So that's one aspect of offending Mother Ganga. Secondly, this is why one of the things that we learn, those who were fortunate enough to live in an ashram, to live in the temple, don't underestimate those devotees. They were very fortunate to live in the temple. Maybe you never had that kind of privilege in your practice, but some devotees did have that opportunity to practice and stay in the temple full time. So one of the things they teach you there is to take bath wearing gamsha. Put a cloth around your body. Don't just go parading into the shower like that. You put a cloth around your body because you respect that there are witnesses in the 10 directions. Night is looking at you, day is looking at you, time is looking at you, fire, so many different entities. All these are witnesses. So by respecting them, This is why when we do fire yagya, then you see the Brahman, he throws the grain behind, he calls Pralad, he throws the grain in front, he calls Bhishmadev, all the Mahajans, he throws the grain in all different directions because he's respecting that they all are present here. You can't even see what's even behind your own head. We can't even see our own eyelashes that blocks the eye. And we want to be able to see where I don't see anything. Prabhupada was asked by a professor once, can you show me God? And Prabhupada asked him, do you have intelligence? He says, yes, I have. I think so because I'm the head of this faculty. He said, okay, put your intelligence here in the palm of my hand. Put your intelligence here. Let me see. I want to see it. He got totally baffled with that kind of an answer. So he said, no, Swamiji, you don't see intelligence directly. You see intelligence by symptom of creation. So Prabhupada said, exactly, you got a whole creation here. You think nobody created this? To see and want to see everything with his eyes is very limiting. These eyes cannot tell us much. It can just see 20/20 or 6 by 6 meter ahead clear. More than that, the eagle sees better than what we see. There's even the concept of seeing. A bat is also seeing, but through sound. Animals see at night like a lion. It has that reflective layer on the back of the eye. All these things are different ways of seeing that we can't see. What if they can actually see things and entities that we can't? And we totally in illusion, and we're just going and parading into the shower like that. You'll only not be offended if you know it's a child. If you know it's a child, because if a child comes in front of people undressed, it doesn't affect anyone. It's a humor. It becomes, oh, look at how innocent this child. He doesn't even know that he has to cover his body. So when an adult does the same thing, you can't say that. When an adult does the same thing, then you can only reconcile that this person is still a child. He doesn't know, he's ignorant. So we can see how this pastime also brings out that one is actually in deep ignorance. He's illusioned first in this material world by having a body, and then when he identifies with that body, he becomes even further illusioned. And he goes further and further down. The banyan tree, from the root of the tree right till the tips of the tree is just different gradations of degradation coming down into this material world, getting trapped. How to get out of the banyan tree? So interesting, Prabhupada mentions in the translation that they were opulent and fortunate. So we know why they were opulent. They were the sons of Kuvera. But why were they fortunate? Because a great sage walked past there one day. And that was Narada Muni. Narada, we see, he's even the one who instructed Satyavrata Muni about Damodarastikam. So Narada is really a transcendental astronaut, Prabhupada calls him. So he came by and he saw that these boys are completely intoxicated with this illusion of this material world. So because when he came by, they didn't even cover their bodies. They were just carrying on as if, oh, this is another person. And that happens when you're intoxicated, when you inebriated, you have no sense of reality around you. Therefore, you can now, they say, be yourself now. You know, when somebody is intoxicated, what happens? What starts coming out? They give the best speeches in the world that they live to regret. So this is what has happened with these two boys. Their worst behavior came out. Their worst behavior without any, respect that as a sadhu, this is a sadhu coming by and you just, parading like this. So Narada cursed them. We'll see that story which will continue tomorrow, how it unfolds as Narada looked at them, had mercy on them, and then used a material curse to give them the highest benediction. It looked like a curse, but it ended up being the highest benediction. Let's see what Prabhupada says here. But because of pride and false prestige, they did not care about anyone, and thus Narada Muni cursed them to become trees. So these two things, pride and false prestige. In the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about this, the one who's in knowledge, one who actually has knowledge. He gives the symptoms of one who's in knowledge. And one of this is pridelessness. Manya sunyate, pridelessness. That the devotee, he has pride, but that pride is because he's a devotee of Krishna. Just, I am so proud to be a devotee of Krishna. And he declares it to the world by his tilak. The whole world, as soon as you see the tilak on the devotee's forehead, Om Keshavaya Namaha, he's put Keshava on his forehead. That same Keshava is Nrsingadev. Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare. Keshava, that he's so proud to be a devotee of Keshava. He's declaring it to the whole world by his tilak and by his behavior. So we see this pridelessness is a great bhushana, an ornament on the devotee. We devotees don't put ornaments like earrings and bangles, and yes, some decoration is like that. But the best ornament they wear is the tilak on the forehead. This is Keshava's footprint. The footprint of the Lord with the tulsi leaf on the nose. This is Keshava. So immediately that signifies service. Tulsi is serving the lotus feet of the Lord. That is bhakti. Immediately, just by the tilak, that is a yantra. It's a symbol of bhakti. It's a symbol of being Vaishnava, devotee of Krishna. Prabhupada would say, devotees would tell Prabhupada, you're such a great devotee of Krishna. And Prabhupada would say, no. Vaishnava is a whole different category. I am just Krishna's servant. What is great, what is a Vaishnava, you'll never understand. That's why you can't understand the heart and the mind of a Vaishnava. It's very, very deep, very, very grave, Gambhira. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in Puri, he would stay in the Gambhira, this place there, very deep place, very solemn place. Very, very immense spiritual depth. So you see these two boys that they were infatuated with pride and false prestige. The identification that you are something. We say, you know me. You know who I am. You don't know who I am. And we become infatuated with this idea. We have to be very careful that we don't fall into the illusion of being illusioned. It's already an illusion. Don't go any further down. You're already illusioned. You have this material body and you're identifying with it. So when are you going to break that? So Narada Muni seemed to have cursed these two boys to be trees. And I'm remembering also Prabhupada. When Prabhupada was at George Harrison, the Bhaktivedanta Manor, the George Harrison estate. At that time, he didn't give it to the ISKCON as yet. And he stayed there. And then one day before he was leaving, he would take his walks around. So he would go into the garden. And, he would just walk around. He would speak to the gardener. Prabhupada had that way. He would ask him, so, how are you doing? How is your family? You have all your teeth? How is your health? You have all your teeth? So he eventually he said, you see me? I have all my teeth. And he just broke the ice with that man, And he said, you see me? I have all my teeth, although I like sweets, but I eat milk sweets. So they're talking, old men talk like this. This is the conversation old men have. You have all your teeth? Wow, you're so great. So he had this conversation with this gardener. And then the next day when they were leaving, Prabhupada immediately told them while they're coming down the driveway, stop the car. And he stopped, he went out into the garden near these two trees that were there. And he just looked around and just like kind of stopped and like prayed there. And then he left. And that night there was a huge storm. And those two trees got knocked down. Those trees were blown down by the hurricane, the storm. So the devotees are remembering, hey, Prabhupada just went there yesterday. Maybe, could be, is it so that he connected to those trees as living entities and liberated them before knowing that there's a storm coming up? Wow. So that is the pastime that occurred. So to take the form of trees is very, very inauspicious. It's a sign that you were parading naked in your past life. It's a very dangerous situation that one does not cover one's body in decency. And we see more and more we're getting this kind of behavior in the world today. The least amount of clothes you have, the more you reveal. This seems to be the fashion and the trend today. So the more you behave that way, the more you're saying, I don't want anything on my body. Oh, okay. You'll be born as trees. We see for 100 celestial years, these trees were born in the household of Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba. So they're not ordinary, but it was due to their misbehavior. So just parading in this way, be careful. Make sure your body is covered properly. That's why especially for our Vaishnavis, our Matajis, Prabhupada's etiquette was cover your hair. Who does it these days? Who does it these days? It's so, nobody, even people, even our chaste, so-called chaste ladies of today don't even follow that anymore. Oh, it's old-fashioned. Really? According to who it's old-fashioned? Prabhupada has given this for eternity. For this type of tradition is practiced for eternity. You've seen any picture of Sita with her hair uncovered? You've seen any picture of Radha with her hair uncovered? And this is old-fashioned? This is culture. Why? Because it only increases your prestige. It only increases your qualities as a woman. It only increases your nature as a mother. This is what we want to bring out. We don't want to, there's enough of the other type of woman in this world. There's enough of that. It doesn't take any practice to be that. But it does take practice for chastity. It does take practice to be honorable and to be respected. This is respect. Any woman who has her hair covered deserves respect. And this is what is offered to her by the community because of that practice. So please think about these small things that we are overlooking as traditional or old-fashioned. These are very deep points. If you consider them, they're very, very deep points. So we go on with the story. We come to the end of this chapter tomorrow, and for the next 2 to 3 days of the Bhishma Panchak, we'll do a summary of the overview of the 10th chapter, which is the actual story of Nalakuvera and Manigriva. So please join us again tomorrow, and happy Kartik to you.